The headlines are being dominated by all of the things going on here in the US, and rightfully so. But there's also a major conflict brewing between two global superpowers that could not only affect the global economy, but ours as well. In this week's video, our team's going to cover the returns and news from last week, a concerning chart pattern that's developing in the S&P 500, and what's going on at the China-India border.
There were a few news stories that led the U.S. markets higher last week. First, U.S. retail sales jumped about 18% in May, and that was the biggest monthly increase that we've seen on record. On Wednesday, a report came out that initial jobless claims declined again, and that's 11 straight weeks now of improvement. And Matt's going to dig a little bit more into exactly what that means in a little bit. Then on Friday, news came out that China pledged to accelerate their purchasing of agricultural products from the United States as part of the Phase 1 trade deal. Now that led the markets higher, but then on Friday afternoon, one of the major tech companies announced that they were closing some of their stores in several states in the US due to more coronavirus fears. Now the market sold off after that news a little bit, but even with that late day sell-off, the US markets ended up the week strong. The S&P was up about 2% for the week. The NASDAQ led the way up almost 4%. And now the NASDAQ is up almost 11% for the year, while the S&P is getting closer to being flat, down only 4%. Also last week, foreign markets were down about 0.75%, while emerging markets were just about flat. Now emerging markets are down 11% for the year, while foreign markets down about 12%.
Mike Tedeschi, Wealth Management Advisor at Perspective Wealth Planning, with this week's market breakdown video for you. We're going to be taking a look at the S&P 500 in this video, and we are going to be talking about a potential island reversal. Now, an island reversal is a price pattern that shows a group of days separated on both sides by gaps in price action. And we have that take place 2 weeks ago, where we have a gap right here and then a gap right here. So these candles right here are off on their own island. They are separated from price on both sides. And this tends to happen at turning points. And the reason why this one is so important for me is where this island reversal pattern takes place. It takes place at this major price action level that we have talked about from back in January and February, right at that key 3,200 level. So as it sits right now, we had a gap down and a push below that island. And unless we can get back up there, this is a potential reversal pattern. Now, one good thing the bulls have going for them is they did find support at that previous breakout level. And so those are the two zones that we're really going to pay a lot of attention to. But this price action pattern certainly was concerning.
There's currently a dispute going on between China and India at their border region in the Himalaya Mountains. Now, just a little history between China and India. They actually had a war that ended in 1962, and they never really decided where the actual border was between China and India. But there's been disputes going on for years now, but never really any shots fired. Now, there hasn't been any shots fired because both sides agreed to a ceasefire back when the war ended. But all of that changed just a couple days ago when a battle broke out between India and China at the border. Now, this battle resembled something that you would have seen on Game of Thrones, not something that you would expect modern combat to look like, with both sides wielding swords, barbed-wired clubs, and rocks. And this fight occurred during the middle of the night on the side of a mountain. And when the dust settled, it's being reported that 20 Indian soldiers and 50 Chinese soldiers were killed, and many more were wounded. Now, both countries are sending more troops to the border, and Beijing is currently enraged that India gave their soldiers permission to fire at will, essentially erasing the 50-year ceasefire agreement. If this continues to escalate, it puts the US in a bad spot because on one hand, we're the #1 trade partner with India. And on the other hand, we're trying to work through a multi-phase trade agreement with China. So whichever side we choose to back in this dispute, obviously the other side is not going to be thrilled. So now I wanted to shift focus back to the US and go over one of the topics that we've been getting a ton of questions about. And that is, what's going on with the jobs numbers? And really, it's kind of a complicated issue because there's so many different numbers that come into play. But the number that's reported on the most is the initial jobless numbers. And those numbers are the people that actually filed for unemployment over the past week. Now, we've been seeing millions and millions of people file for unemployment since the beginning of March. And although the numbers have been declining, there's still over 1 million people a week filing for their initial unemployment claims. So that begs the question, how did we actually add jobs in the month of May? Well, there's actually another unemployment number that's out there that they don't really report on, and that's the continuous unemployment number. That's the number of people that have filed for unemployment and actually stay on it for longer than 2 weeks. And that number peaked right at the beginning of May and then dropped from 25 million to about 20 million, and that's where we currently sit now. So that puts our current unemployment rate right around 13%. And that's the number that we're going to be focused on when the jobs numbers come out Thursday, because that number really shows us how the economy is doing right now. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoy our content, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook.